Welcome back, happy engineer, and congrats. We made it. You and I have waited for 2 years for this moment, and it's time for the best of best, celebrating episode 100. How many hours does it take to listen to 99 episodes of the Happy Engineer podcast? Pick the 10 most powerful lessons learned from all of these amazing guests, and then condense it down to bite-sized chunks for us to celebrate episode 100. Well, the answer is that I lost count, but it doesn't matter because I'm so excited to share this with you. What we're bringing here are the most loved moments of the Happy Engineer podcast from 2 years ago when we launched up to now at episode 100. And if you don't hear your favorite moment, I'm just going to say, you got to speak up. Just tell me. Share it on social and tag me so I know which episodes you love. Email me anytime. My address is zach@oasisofcourage.com, ZACH@oasisofcourage.com. I would love to hear from you. But let's get into these top 10 clips, and here's what you can expect. I'm going to introduce each clip, what episode number and what guest you're going to hear from, and a little bit about why that clip was chosen. Then you'll hear a short snippet from the original episode. And I would encourage you to grab notes and go back to the full episode of any of these that really stand out for you. Now, before we get started, last thing, I want to say thank you. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a listener, for being out there and loving on the Happy Engineer podcast. We're now in the top 1.5% as a global rank among all podcasts. And when you listen and share this, you're helping me to reach more lives, to be able to give this message to as many engineering leaders as I possibly can. And doing that is the best feeling in the world. I truly can't thank you enough for your support and being here through 100 episodes. And hey, if this is your very first episode to listen to the Happy Engineer podcast, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And I just want you to know, thank you for your time today. So, are you ready for the Happy Engineer top 10 tips? Let's do this. Top tip number 1 is going to help you in every single area of your life, not just your career. Now, odds are good as you are listening to this podcast that you're doing something else. You're driving, you're working out, maybe you're doing chores or yard work, something like that. And you might even be among the many people who pride yourself at being great at multitasking, whether it's listening and doing chores or doing multiple tasks at the same time at work. Maybe you're even someone who prides yourself as being really great at multitasking. Well, when I was a senior manager at Whirlpool Corporation, I remember the moment that I discovered I was not good at multitasking. I was a senior manager in a meeting that probably had too many people in the room, to be honest, but I was sitting against the wall, really not engaging too much. It was a vice president leading the meeting, and most of the directors were at the table. A few of us had been invited at the senior manager level to contribute for a couple of the agenda topics. So I'm against the wall, sitting in my chair, doing email and multitasking during this meeting, taking a few notes here and there, listening to the conversation, but focusing on cleaning out my inbox at the same time. Well, right in the middle of the meeting, the VP turns to the wall and points to the leader next to me and asks a question about where they were at in the meeting topic. And this guy, who will remain nameless for the sake of his own reputation, had no idea what they were talking about. And the VP made a comment right then and there in the meeting, something to the effect of, if you're in this room and you're not in this room, then feel free to step out. Woo! It was a tough moment. And let's just say that this engineering leader next to me put his laptop away and was fully engaged for the rest of the meeting, and so was I. I want you to take that to heart as you listen to this next segment. The man who wrote the book, The Myth of Multitasking, Dave Crenshaw, all the way back in episode 3, I asked him to give us the truth once and for all about the myth of multitasking, so pay attention.
Okay, the easiest way to get out of this argument is to sidestep it completely. Multitasking, the word itself, is the problem because it's one word that's trying to describe multiple complex processes that might be taking place in your brain. Stop thinking in terms of multitasking and instead think in terms of these two words: switch tasking or backtasking. Switch tasking is when you're trying to perform multiple attention requiring tasks at the same time. That would be like listening to this podcast while answering email. And if you're switch tasking, you are paying switching cost. Now that has, if you have any background in economics, that's a loaded phrase, because switching cost means you have to pay a cost greater than just what you did. Meaning every time you switch attention, there's a cognitive load, there's a drop in time, there's an increase in mistakes, there's an increase in stress levels that you experience. So switch tasking is always counterproductive, or at least it always has a cost associated with it. Now, backtasking is where something mindless, mundane, or automatic occurs in the background. For instance, you're jogging while listening to this podcast. That can be productive because one of the things is automatic. It requires no attention. Therefore, you are getting more productive. So really the question that I would ask, if someone came to you, Zach, and they said, I'm a great multitasker, I would say, do you mean you're a great switch tasker, or do you mean you're a great backtasker? Because backtasking is important. That's delegating a project to someone else while they're working on one thread of an engineering project while you're working on something else. That is good. That is productive. But if they're talking about trying to have multiple things happening that are requiring attention, they're kidding themselves. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. So what you held in your hand is the second edition of The Myth of Multitasking. The first edition came out in 2008. At that time, there were a lot of studies, maybe, 10 to 20 studies that exist. We're now in 2021. There are hundreds of studies. There's a preponderance of evidence that says when you try to accomplish multiple attention requiring tasks at the same time, you are being less productive.
So this is a really powerful distinction. And I love this sidestepping the argument altogether. So for the person who believes, if you're listening to this and you believe that you are somehow special or unique in switch tasking, that you can actively respond to an important email while you're listening to Dave and I talk about why you should not be doing that. The evidence is clear. That is not the way that our brain is intended to operate for ultimate productivity. Yeah. I see you've got something on the tip of your tongue.
And I would add one thing to that too. Interesting. In my own backyard, University of Utah, there's a research place. They've done lots of studies. Here's the funny thing about it. The more someone thinks that they are excellent at multitasking, there is a correlation between them being more likely to be terrible at it. So the more proud you are of thinking you're a multitasker, I can pretty much guarantee you're probably one of the worst there is at it.
Top tip number 2 for your career and for your life is one that I deeply resonate with, and I saw it come to life in one of my clients named Andy. When Andy and I first talked, he was in a place where he told me for years he had a dream of launching his own business. He knew what idea he wanted to pursue. He had the skill and capability, but he kept backing down and staying in his W-2 career, even though he didn't feel like that was what he was called to do. And we approached this question from a new lens and said, what's going on in your mindset that's holding you back? Let's create an inspiring vision of the future that is so motivating that you must take action and strengthen the courage and confidence to walk away from your comfort zone and go after your calling. And in just months, Andy was able to launch that business, land his first big contract, and take that guaranteed income to get things off the ground to leave his W-2 9-to-5 role. He is on fire. He's excited, and he's stepping fully into his purpose. And in episode 72, James Reed, an incredible leader and coach, talks about this paradigm he calls the runner-up mindset. I remember the days in my career vividly where success on paper, success externally, making sure my family and friends and everybody else saw the version of Zach that I wanted them to see, that they believed was true as my career was growing and I was happy and happily married and all this, and dying on the inside. Yeah. And I think sometimes we think like, how is that possible to stay in that situation so long? And I'm just curious, if you were to go back for yourself, like how did you justify, or what was going on, if anything, that kept you in that job, even though you were aware this isn't what I was called to do, it's ruining my life, but I keep doing it?
Huh.
Is there anything for you that you remember about why it went on as long as it did?
Yes, the wrong paradigm. And here it is. And you'll appreciate this as an athlete, and whoever else is listening who was an athlete or just competes in any way, which all of us are competitors in our own way. I call it the runner-up mindset. It was when I make it, when I get the big bonus check, when I reach a certain level in the company, comma, then I'm going to be able to take care of my family. So the intentions were great, Zach, which I'm assuming yours were too, and everyone else listening. Our intentions are great. I want to take care of my family. I want to be able to bless people. But how are we getting there? And who is the person executing that? And who are we putting our faith in? And who's surrounding us to put that in place and keep us accountable to it? See, all those things weren't in place. It was just me thinking I had to get some external thing in order to really fulfill those intentions. And it was like a drug I swallowed every single day. I was so blind to my wife's frustration and her anger. How could you be that numb to someone who you've been married to for 10 plus years at the time, just being angry at you every day? That's what kept me going down that cycle.
Top tip number 3 is one that I had to share because it combines two of my favorite things. Number 1 is stepping out of your comfort zone. And number 2, fighter jets. Okay, if you didn't know this, little fun fact about Zach White, my stepdad is a retired vice admiral from the Navy, call sign Smiles, and he was an aviator. He flew F-14 Tomcats back when the Tomcat first rolled out into the United States Navy. So the movie Top Gun is one of my absolute favorites, and if you want an experience that will change your life, watch the movie Top Gun with my stepdad. I could listen to Navy fighter pilot stories all Christmas long. But in episode 39, Waldo Waldman, a Hall of Fame public speaker who also flew F-16s in the United States Air Force, shared a story that blew my mind about getting out of the comfort zone and building resilience through his fighter pilot career. Check this one out.
Here's another thing, and there's another point that forces me to step out of my comfort zone and help me accomplish my missions in fear. I talked about having that compelling goal, that vision of what you want to become, but also the feeling that you get when you're done going through the trial, when you're done lifting the weight, when you're done going through the diet, and you look at your body and you're like, I lost the 6 pounds and my body fat's leaner. The feeling, the juice, the energy, the mindset shift that happens when you know deep down that you accomplished the goal and won, that feeling, the endorphins that you create, that's that inner juice that builds the confidence. So I have a saying, pain leads to peace. And peace, in my opinion, is just being good at where you're at. You're comfortable where you're at, this quiet confidence that says, I'm at peace now because I know I did all the work. No one may have seen it. No one knows the study, the sweat, the sacrifice, the insight, the neglect that I had to put in my life in order to gain something else. So that peace is what we're seeking, and that joy that's incumbent in that peace, knowing that you did the work. So when I would do these 7 or 8 hour night combat missions, facing a panic attacks and a fear of heights, I almost died in a scuba diving accident. Long story short, folks, I developed claustrophobia 3 years into my flying career. A few days after the scuba diving incident, I was flying along in terrible weather and had a panic attack, developed claustrophobia. I'm like, I got to get the heck out of this plane. And so for the next 8 years of my 11-year flying career, every time I strapped into that plane to do what I loved more than anything else, I had to deal with this missile, this demon that threatened to paralyze me and keep me in the hangar of fear instead of airborne, facing my fears, courageous, potentially getting shot at, but living, being in the cockpit, not missing an action, but making it happen in the sky. But so your ability to strap into that jet and face those fears is critical. But after I did one mission, after having a panic attack and landed, freaked out, and said, I can't do this anymore. And then put the wings back on and said, one more mission, one more flight, just take one more step forward. It got easier and easier. So 8-hour missions in Iraq or Kosovo, the missiles were bothering me, but the claustrophobia, that was the real fear. And when I'd land, Zach, I'd land and taxi in, I'm like, man, no one knew the chaos that just ensued. No one knew that anxiety and craziness, this combat mission I had up here in my head. And I'm taxiing in saying another victory over the most important enemy or friend there is, which is ourselves. And I said, I did it. No one took that away from me. It was my own personal victory. And that's what built up the resilience and my courage and my ability to build credibility in coaching people and doing my programs now, because that's the real juice. It's not a fear like, oh, I was afraid of being rejected, or I was afraid of being, I was a Jewish fighter pilot, right? There was a little bit of, anti-Semitism growing up, but I don't live as a victim, right? I never looked at, but I'm talking about 30,000 feet with missiles being launched, saying, I got to bail out of this plane because I'm going to jump through my skin. I'm facing true fear, not simulated or psychological BS. But when we overcome ourselves, that builds confidence, and it often causes scars, but it builds up this sense of compassion and empathy that we need as leaders, mostly with ourselves when we do fail / learn, that we're going to get back in the cockpit and say, I'm doing it again. I've got that true north. I want to get that feeling again of overcoming myself. And that's something that no other person can give you.
Waldo, this really resonates for me because in my story, building my career, engineering leader, things are going great. And the missiles in my day-to-day life, dealing with challenges at work and solving big problems and hitting deadlines and meeting budgets, this sort of external stuff that was flying around that you had to deal with. But yeah, those things were at times scary to me, but I also had this internal struggle of my marriage collapsing, things at home not going well, dealing with all this stuff in my own head. And so just this combination of like, yeah, there's things in the world to be afraid of, but a lot of times we've got something between our ears that's causing just as much or more difficulty in moving through the day, and both take courage to overcome. I've found that true self-esteem is on the other side of that victory, to your point. When you do the hard thing, you get through, like that feeling you're talking about. It's the closest thing I can think of that relates to real, genuine esteem, is when you've gone through it to the other side. And that, to me, that's the only word I have for that feeling. I'm not sure there is another one, but awesome to hear that. Top tip number 4 might be the most important mindset shift that you can possibly make as a leader of people in your engineering career at any level. Think about this situation with my client, Aaron. Aaron was a senior manager when we were talking about what's next for his career. And little context, his career had been going great. 5 promotions in 5 years. He enrolled in our coaching program to continue his development, and now he was being recruited for a director role at a startup in the automotive space with a huge opportunity to expand the size of his team, expand his leadership scope, and increase his income and compensation as a result. Great opportunity. But Aaron was afraid of one thing, was taking on that director role, going to force him to compromise his values as a husband, as a father. You see, Aaron really valued balance. He valued that time to be able to go home and be with his growing daughters while they were young. He wanted to be present to support his spouse. And he had a lot of fear behind this mindset that if I take on a director role, will I have to work so many hours that I won't be able to be home in those really important times for my growing family? Aaron had the mindset that so many engineering leaders do, that when you take on more work and more scope, that it means you're going to work harder, that to move up the org chart means longer hours, that every bigger opportunity as a leader means you need to give up a bigger chunk of your life. And in episode 57, Aaron Hatzakostas brings the truth, the hard truth, the tough love truth about leadership, that harder work is the lazy way out. Don't miss this one. It is so, so important. Here we go.
First of all, I didn't work in Storyland or some fanciful place. In fact, my leader, because I was CEO, but I still reported up to an EVP of the parent company, was not authentic, was a sort of corporate, like she had been doing it the way forever. And what I'll say is that there is a period of time, whether it's micro or macro, so it could be on a meeting that you're doing or a project you're leading or business, where it's going to feel uncomfortable. If you, for example, say, okay, normally we do these projects and we always do a steering committee and we report it up and we fill out 17 templates and you say, we're not going to do that anymore. I'm just picking an example. If we said, we're going to do it our own way, we're going to do it, we're going to cut out the BS, we're going to do it our own way. There is going to be a period of time of resistance, but here's when your leadership doesn't care. When you get results. So there was a period of time for a couple of months where my boss thought I was nutso, like just some of the ways I was negotiating things or doing things. I'm sure she was like, she has no idea what she's doing and let's hurry up this executive search. But once you start showing results, which you will, because guess what? Everybody is craving you to be that leader that cuts out the crap and acts more human and all the principles that I talk about around authenticity. You're going to get better results. Once you start getting those better results, they ain't going to give two hoots what you're doing, because that's all your leadership cares about. First of all, if you're I have a quote in my book. I think it's something like, if you're working harder, you're leading worser. Some of that, I'm just going to be tough love. Like, you're addicted to the hum and the buzz, and the fact that you think that you're going to take on an executive role and work more hours is probably because you're lazy and you're not leading enough. And I know that's really tough love. And trust me, I've been there. I am not perfect, but yeah, everybody has those constraints. But once you can get the results doing it a different way and you can get the best, really, it's about getting the best team. Let's be honest. At the end of the day, I used to laugh. I'm like, it's one big popularity contest. Within the halls of Aetna, 50,000 people, I was constantly stealing the best talent. You know how easy your job gets when you have the best talent?
Yeah.
You know how much less you work, less you stress if you have the best talent. So there is an investment period where you might look weird, you might be working harder, but if you have the guts to say, well, it's either that or I just keep running on the same treadmill, and that might not work out either. If you have the guts to say, I'm going to do it different, it will pay off, but you've got to get through that period.
I want to put a giant exclamation point on this idea that if you simply solve the problem that you're facing by working harder, longer hours, that's actually the lazy way out, because you're not doing what it takes to lead and become that authentic leader who can then enable and equip and delegate and all the things it takes to let the organization improve. And the ego in me even curls up right now as we talk about it. I still want to go down that path because it feels good for Zach to know that I carried the banner and I'm the one who got us across the finish line. And I know better in my conscious mind, but even today, there's this little voice in the back that's like, I want to go crush it, and working hard makes me feel good. And so, Aaron, that's like, we could do a whole nother episode just on that point. I have some great news for you before I go on to tip number 5. Remember my client who was considering that director level position? Well, he took the job. And here's what's so exciting. By choosing this mindset that there is always a way to lead at a higher level rather than work harder and give up your life, he has been able to create the balance that he desires in this director opportunity. Was every week perfect? Of course not. There were some long, hard weeks. But on the whole, he is happy and grateful that he has been able to take on this big challenge to live into his purpose at work and live into his purpose at home. You can do it too, so don't underestimate and don't buy in to the lie that moving up, the only way to succeed is to give up your whole life. All right, top tip number 5. This one is fun because it combines learning from two sources where we can find so many powerful parallels between our careers. First is the arena of sports, and second is the childlike nature of young people. Just kids, watching kids who don't have the filters, who are in such a rapid phase of learning and growth, the kind of growth that we need to continue to evolve and become the best leaders and best engineers that we can be. In episode 9, Coach Khan, who works with Olympic track girls soccer when they're still young. These are the top athletes in the nation on track for making the Olympic team one day. He shared the differences between the comfort zone and everything outside of that, which we might think is simply binary. There's in the comfort zone and outside the comfort zone, but Coach Khan shows us that there is more to the story and talks about the importance of these different zones in maximizing your performance. I found this so important because I talk about getting out of the comfort zone all the time with my clients, and this is a key insight to how you need to structure your time and focus to get the most out of your own growth. Check it out.
To me, soccer is a wonderful example. Working with the kiddos has given me an opportunity to take all of these complex concepts that I apply in my coaching and my teaching and simplify them down and work with the kids at the most basic level. And then take the example of the kids and bringing it up to my executives so they understand the basic truth of what we're talking about. So let me give you an example. If I'm trying to balance things out and I'm trying to apply a new skill, when I work with the kids during the week, I will challenge them. I will push them to the point of failures. I will challenge them with questions. I will ask all that stuff. That's the learning zone. That's the learning zone in our process where if I'm progressing from this piece, I'm in my comfort zone. I need to get beyond my fear zone where my hesitation is. Now I'm entering into the learning zone where it's okay for me to fail, but I have to try and figure out this new thing. And I practice it in a safe place, in a safe environment. Before I get to the performance zone, which is our games on the weekend, where there, I'm not going to sit there and yell at my kids like a lot of coaches do out there, or try like a joystick coach to move them around. I allow them to express themselves in that real-time environment because all the work's been done during the week. Well, let's take a look at how that translates to the engineer out there. The engineer that's working with you, Zach, in that safe environment to role play, to practice, to test the scenarios of what he or she is doing with you in a safe place. How can I express this? What does this sound like? Where am I going with this? You're going to ask them as we coaches call it, the dumb questions, because those are the discovery questions that are going to lead them to make those realizations. And then they're going to go out into the performance zone. Is it going to be perfect? No. But it's important for them to reach out to their people and say, you know what? Hey, I want to be able to support you. I'm trying something new. Let me know how this is working for you. Engage the other person in the process to be able to get to that next level. And then keep doing it. Keep doing it. Those moments of micro excellence and micro habits add up.
There's two things here because it's so easy to understand in the context of sports. And I love connecting it to career because then we see how different it is. When I played high school baseball, for example, we practiced 80% of the time and we were in games 20% of the time, maybe even 90-10, right? The time in performance was very small in comparison to the time in practice. Then we go get our engineering degree and we show up on day one to do our jobs. And we're 100% of the time in this performance mindset. Like you just have to do the job, show up and start doing it. Right. And when do you actually practice the skills? What are you doing to create space for that? And it completely flip-flops. You're lucky if you have any time to actually practice. And what you just described there, you're role playing with a coach. If you're a manager, if you're a director, a VP, and you want to improve at how do I perform in holding a leadership paradox effectively as an engineering leader here? Well, have you been practicing? And do you have those systems and things set up in your life to actually be present with that and get the repetition before game day, before performance time? That's so easy to forget that world-class athletes practice a lot and world-class leaders do too, whether it's with a coach or by yourself in visualization or meditation, journaling, all of these skills and practices that are simple but neglected.
Correct.
And so I love that. I love that. Top tip number 6 comes at a point in your career where so many engineering leaders get really stuck and frustrated. See if you can picture this situation. My client Giovanna was running around putting out every single fire in the organization that her team was involved in. As a frontline manager, she was involved in so many projects and didn't realize that her behavior in showing up to every meeting and every challenge, acting like the superstar individual contributor, was actually demotivating her team instead of helping them to feel supported and cared for. And it was actually causing even more work to fall on her because her team became used to the fact that, don't worry, boss will get here soon and tell us what to do. Well, we started making shifts, showing her that you need to begin building trust with your team by letting them use their zones of genius and their strengths to solve these problems. Start coaching your team instead of doing the work and begin breaking these old habits from being an IC. And the team began to put out the fires, and Giovanna began to lead at a higher level. Well, in episode 53, Vice President of Engineering Donna Sherrill talked about her experience as a first-line manager, the challenge of making that leap and the shift that needs to happen to do it well, to do it with grace, and to become the kind of leader who enables your team to be at their best, as well as continuing to grow then if you aspire to higher levels of leadership beyond that first-line manager. If second line, if director, if C-suite level roles like Donna is something you want, then pay close attention, because overcoming this first big hurdle, becoming a great manager and not just a great individual contributor, is one of the steps we all must take on that journey to the top. Enjoy this quick tip from Donna Sherrill.
As I got into the role, it was bumpy at first. I made mistakes. I think there's a switch that needs to go off if you're not already thinking about it. If this wasn't something that you were already working towards, where you have to realize how you support and enable your teams, your participation is different as a manager than it is as an individual contributor. And so it's less about your hands on keyboard, and it's more about how are you empowering and enabling your team to achieve the things that they need to achieve. So they need your support in a different way. There's still obviously technical mentorship. There's still obviously, rolling up your sleeves and digging in and helping troubleshoot when the team needs it and asks for it. But a lot of what you're doing is figuring out, hey, these are the individuals that are on my team. This is each individual's particular genius or strength areas, and how they help kind of level up others on the team in that area. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got that mix of, I've got some growth areas and I've got some areas that are, more subject matter expertise, right? And so you really need to understand that, and also understand what kind of motivates each individual on your team. And, those are tools that you gain to help you figure out, okay, how do we best work with each other as a group and make sure people are getting the right opportunities and make sure people are being challenged in the right ways. And, together we're going to achieve the outcomes we're looking for. And so it took me some bad experiences to realize that. And as I said, we didn't really have other engineering leaders in the company. So it's not like there's somebody there that's mentoring me and saying hey, this is how you should be thinking about this. Right. So figured it out. When I did, it became a much more enjoyable experience. And then I just realized I really, really enjoy the feeling that I get. I get so proud of individuals when I see the journey that, we're all going through together, and I see the outcome on the other side and what we've all been able to accomplish together. And it just makes me so proud. I didn't realize this was a thing that I valued years and years ago, but then when I experienced it, it's a joy for sure.
So Donna, tell us about your worst mistake in that first manager job.
Just one.
or two, or however many. What were your mistakes?
I think I just was I was still so focused and in the mode of, I'm in the board, I'm in the Jira board, I'm picking up a ticket, I'm looking at people's code and doing code reviews. And, it's different if the way you've set up the relationship and trust with the team is that the team would like your input and wants you to get some feedback, versus you're doing it and you're giving people feedback and they're like, does Donna not trust us that we know how to code and we can have quality code reviews amongst ourselves. And it wasn't that I was like, I don't have that trust and I'm checking on what everybody's doing. It was more like, I'm helping the team out because this is the stuff that I was doing already, you know, as being an IC on the team. Right. And I think it was stuff like that. So it wasn't one huge thing, but it was more of being involved at that level still versus being involved in a different way where I was trying to understand like, hey, where do you need help? How can I help you? What are your challenges? What's going well? What's not going well? Instead, just inserting myself and thinking I'm helping, but really it's creating this trust factor with the team where the team is feeling like, okay, well, Donna doesn't trust that we know what we're doing.
This next one, top tip number 7, you might not care about because it only matters if you really want to be one of the most respected, admired, and impactful leaders that people will ever know. Oh, never mind. That's absolutely you. So let's talk about this. And there's 2 parts to this incredible tip from Anton Gunn, who in episode 34 shares wisdom from one of the broadest and most incredible backgrounds of any of my guests. College football player at the highest level, working with the Obama administration on healthcare, and now one of the most impactful public speakers in the world on the topic of injustice in the workplace, among other things. Anton is a rock star, but he talks about his uniqueness and how important it is for you to embody your uniqueness at work. And I think the reason this really stood out to me is because if I'm being honest, I struggled with this. I'll just use the Happy Engineer podcast as an example. I spent a lot of time looking at other podcasters and listening to my favorite podcasts, looking for the things that I wanted to emulate. You see, I've always been really good at being like a chameleon, taking on the style, the voice, the tone, the energy, the techniques of other people and modeling great success. And even Tony Robbins says that modeling is one of the most important strategies to success. Don't reinvent the wheel. But at the end of the day, you must find that place inside yourself that is your uniqueness. And Anton Gunn brings that to the surface and shares how important uniqueness is. And for me, this was a defining moment when I began to own my own voice, began to step powerfully into the things that make me unique, and letting the Happy Engineer podcast, as well as all the work I do, even in domains outside of my career and my business, thinking about my uniqueness as a husband, as a son, as a brother, as a friend. So enjoy this really powerful tip that's going to help you become the leader you want to be, aligned with the leader who you are.
The more you lean into your uniqueness, the happier you'll be in your workplace, the happier you'll be in your life, because we all get told to suppress who we are. I mean, you know, you ever heard in a job interview, someone say to you, leave your personal life at home, or when you come to work, don't bring your personal life. How do you really divorce yourself from yourself to do a job? I've never been successful at that because I know the things that I deal with at home are going to be with me everywhere. I mean, my wife is always going to text me. My daughter's going to call me. I'm going to be thinking about my mom. So I can't divorce myself from my life when I show up in any kind of business setting. But if I get the opportunity to share that and to be myself at work, it makes me happier, it makes me healthier, less stressed. And I really do feel like that the people I work with care about me.
I love how you describe the connection, and I agree 100% that the more you live into your authentic, unique self, the happier, the lighter, the more energetic and enthusiastic the experience of work becomes.
And as a leader, these are the 3 questions that every employee that you lead, every person in your household that looks up to you as a leader, they ask these 3 questions every day. They ask them over and over again. And you may never hear them verbalize these questions, but just say they're tattooed on their foreheads.
Okay.
And how you answer these questions as a leader will determine your success or your failure. Here are the 3 questions. Question number 1 is, do you care about me? Question number 2 is, will you help me? And question number 3 is, can I trust you? And they don't want to hear the word yes to any of those 3 questions. They want to see in your actions that you actually care about them, that you're willing to help them, and that they can trust you. So whether it's your children, whether it's your spouse, whether it's the team that you lead at work, or whether it's the community in which you serve in a leadership role, doesn't matter what you do. Just know that every person that is in a subordinate position or in a situational position where they're looking to you for leadership, they're asking those three questions. Does he care about me? Is she willing to help me? And can I trust her? If you can answer yes to those three questions with your actions, then you put yourself in a position to be one of the most respected, admired, and impactful leaders that people will ever know.
For top tip number 8, I want you to go back and remember the moment that you fell in love with engineering. What were you doing? Was it something that your parents introduced you to? You've loved it since before you can remember. Maybe you had a teacher who really helped you to open your eyes and wake up to your passion for science and technology. And maybe your guidance counselor in high school said engineering was a path aligned with your strengths and you didn't discover it until college. When was the moment for you that you fell in love with engineering? Well, my passionate plea for top tip number 8 is that you would reconnect with that passion and do it through this story from my guest back in episode 35, Myra Nawabi. Myra's an aeronautical engineer with a master's in leadership from Cal State, but when you hear what she came through to get to this success and how her passion, the seed of passion and enthusiasm and connection to aeronautical engineering, how that pulled her through trials so severe, I can't even imagine it. It inspired me. It's one of the moments of this podcast that absolutely gripped me as much as any other conversation I've ever had. I will never forget it. And I hope that you'll never forget that moment for yourself, because when you connect deeply to why you became an engineer in the first place, it will help you get through so many of the toughest moments of your career and life in getting to that place where you feel the deep, fulfilling happiness that you long for. So Myra, tell us, why did you want to be an engineer in the first place?
Well, at the age of 6, I fell in love with the night sky. To me, I would look at the stars every night and I would wonder what else was out there. I wondered if there was another little girl living in the moon, and what did she wear? What did she eat? Did she have parents? And I would ask people what's on the moon, and they would say, oh, well, a bunch of rocks. And I didn't accept that. And the 6-year-old that I was, I believed that maybe there was these humans that, not humans, but entities in other planets that were invisible, and they were just not showing themselves to these humans that they couldn't trust. So if I went there, then they would show themselves to me. Of course, I'm a 6-year-old. What do I know, right? But that's where my love for aerospace came, is that as a child, I just loved the night sky. I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to explore it. I wanted to go to outer space and see for myself all the different stars out there. I wanted to see the Earth from outer space. So that's where this love of engineering came for me.
When you look at the night sky now, Myra, do you still feel that same part of you that was a 6-year-old with that wild imagination?
Yes, every day.
Every day. I love that. I love that. So 6-year-old Myra falls in love with the night sky. Just tell us really briefly, what was that journey like to entering engineering school from age 6 till, 4th year and dropping out? What happened in that time in between?
A lot happened. At the age of 6, Afghanistan, which is the country of my birth, was invaded by the Russians. At the age of 10, I ended up being a refugee. I lived for 2 years as a refugee in Pakistan. Then at the age of 12, I came to the United States as a refugee. So a lot happened. There's a lot to unpack there. but it was great for me because when I came to the United States, I read about Sally Ride and I was like, oh, if she can go to outer space, so can I. And so the one thing that became solid for me was this dream of becoming a aeronautical engineer. That was a path. In a country like Afghanistan, the space program didn't exist. So I chose to go to Russia or came to America. So that part was taken care of. But there was a lot that happened. And when I enrolled in engineering, like I was once waitlisted for a class. I had taken calculus 1 and 2, and I was waiting to take 3. When I talked to the professor, he said I should be home bare feet and pregnant. And ironically, I ended up taking the class with his sister-in-law. Yes.
Okay. Hold on. We need to pause for a moment and acknowledge that the last 30 seconds, there's so much gravity behind what you're describing. And first of all, that's just disgusting that ever happened to you. And I'm so sorry about that. But let me back up just a moment. And I can maybe even speak for myself, Myra. It's really, I want to say, impossible to even imagine that journey from age 6 to entering engineering school with the background I come from. And by no means will we get me into your world fully today, but can you just describe, for someone who's not even in the same stratosphere, what was the biggest thing that shifted or changed in you during that time? If you were going to say here's how that made me who I am today, what's that big takeaway?
It's staying connected to that dream of that 6-year-old that fell in love with the night sky, right? As I went through my journey and things got more and more difficult, I had to keep reminding of myself that even when the war broke out, the night sky was my solace, right? As the rockets were flying, as bombs were exploding all around me, that was the one place that I could just look up to, and it gave me comfort. It gave me the strength that I needed to keep going. The hardest part was the 2 weeks that it took to flee Afghanistan on foot. It's one of the most difficult journey that you could go through, and it's fraught with dangers everywhere because you're going through at night during, through difficult terrain. It's hard to see. If you did it during the day, it would freak out the living daylights out of you. Crawling through mountains that most mountaineers would have gear for, and yet you don't have any of that. You're just crawling through the mountain, hands and feet, and you're doing it at night. So to me, the night sky, I just kept looking at it, and it hadn't changed. While my life had changed completely drastically, and it was filled with all kinds of horrors, the night sky was still just as comforting, and it was still the same. And I could look at the stars and they would twinkle at me. And I just felt that comfort, that belonging.
Wow. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes, Myra, just imagining you as a child going through that. And I'm so honored that you're here with us today to tell that story, and for a reason. So let's keep this rolling. We could just talk about that all day. There's so much. Wow. Some of the most challenging parts of being an engineering leader have nothing to do with engineering. One of those is facing business conditions. In other words, facing layoffs. And my client, who we'll call Mark, was someone impacted by a layoff when we first met. He was telling me about his situation, how long he'd been looking for a new job, and I asked him the question, why do you think that your company laid you off as opposed to someone else? And the initial response was common for a lot of people, pointing the finger, blaming the economy, blaming the decisions of leaders above him outside of his control. And once we were done venting all of those external things, I asked him again, let's take a second look here, and I want you to tell me, how did you contribute to this result? How did you allow this to happen? And that's a hard question. It really causes the ego to flare up. But the truth came out. He had stopped showing up at his best. He had gotten complacent. He had really reached a place of being bored and was just getting by at work. He wasn't doing his best. The fact is that Mark was showing up as an amateur, not a pro. What's the difference? Amateurs do their best when they feel like it, when the work is exciting or engaging. A pro does their best because it's their job. Amateurs blame other people for their problems, and pros take full responsibility. And there's no one who can explain being a professional better than Jim Cathcart, here for top tip number 9. Jim Cathcart, back in episode 88, shared what it means to be a true professional. And Jim is the kind of leader who speaks in perfect sentences of golden nuggets and wisdom for your career. Everything he says is a top tip. He's one of the most rewarded and recognized public speakers in the world, top 5. He's in the Public Speaking Hall of Fame and has spoken on more stages than you and I will ever even imagine being on. Jim is the epitome of professionalism. And in this little clip, you're going to hear a story that explains what it really means to be a pro. So, okay, this is totally random. It popped in my head as you were telling that story. Did you ever have the dreams that we joke about where you're at the front of the classroom and you forgot to put your clothes on that day, or the embarrassing or the fearful moment? Did you ever have those kind of dreams?
There's one dream that was a recurring dream. I hadn't had it in years now, but I had it easily half a dozen times over an extended period. The dream was there was a meeting scheduled. I was the keynote speaker. The person who was introducing me was in the process of introducing me, and I was 2 blocks away down a steep hill on foot. So I wasn't going to be there when the introduction finished. So that was my fear.
Interesting.
See, one of the things I take great pride in is being truly professional in my role as an outside expert or a professional speaker. I genuinely know who my audience is in advance. I've done all the study, I've read every inch of their website, including the copyrights at the bottom and the disclaimers, literally. I over prepare like that because who knows when something random is going to pop into my head that makes a perfect illustration. And they go, how did he know that? Wow.
Yes.
Right. And in the old days, I would read the company's orientation manual and their annual report. But since websites, thank you, Lord, I can get it all in advance. But I show up early. I meet my introducer. I give them a prepared introduction that's short and easy to do. And it's not just a curriculum vitae that would put them all to sleep. Mm-hmm. It ends with, our speakers, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But there's another side that's more interesting. He's also been a nightclub singer, a bartender, a bill collector, insurance salesman, a motorcycle salesman, and an internet business owner. And then it says he may not be able to hold a job, but I understand he can really hold an audience. Let's welcome Jim Cathcart. So, I do things like that. But if I've given Zach that introduction and he's the introducer, when he gets up to do the introduction, he might say, where did I put that? So I always have another copy of it in my pocket. And just before he gets up on the platform, I say, you need an extra copy? Thank you. I left that in my room.
Oh, my goodness.
So
Brilliant.
Things like that. And if the lights go out, which I've had happen, if there's a medical emergency in the audience, which I've had happen, if the building catches on fire and we have to evacuate, which I've had happen multiple times, if the president is shot while you're in the meeting and you hear the news, someone comes in, which I've had happen. All of these things, if those things happen, if it's too hot, it's too cold, if there's loud noises, if whatever, I know how to handle that. And so I'm never rude to an audience member. I'm never out of control, because if you've got the mic, you're the guy.
Yes.
If the place catches on fire, who else can evacuate them more efficiently than you?
This is so interesting, Jim, because the spirit of professionalism, the mindset of being a professional, I don't want to judge too harshly, but I feel like it's different or more rare to have somebody who takes their profession as seriously as what you just described today and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's always been rare. I'm thinking back to my engineering days, when I was in my career, and no one came alongside me and described what it really meant to be a professional the way that you just articulated that in your zone of genius. So how would you articulate, what does it mean to be a professional? What is the mindset of a true
You're walking into my wheelhouse. A professional There are 5 qualifiers. A professional is highly educated for what they do. Their education is considered never ending, so it's lifelong education, renewed
Okay.
constantly, right? It's done for pay.
Okay.
It's done according to a set of ethical standards, and it's done as a service to the recipient.
I can't believe we're already at our last one, but it's time for top tip number 10. And I'll be completely honest, this tip is just as much a reminder for me as it is for you. I have always been a sucker for a great tactic or a great new tool. For years, all the way back into my early career days, I would read every book I could get my hands on, listen to every podcast I had time to consume, and work on mastering a new tactic, a new tool, figure out a new framework from the hot new book on the shelves at Barnes & Noble. I have always loved that, but I remember vividly working with my coach back in my career days on the importance of not just focusing on learning new tools, but to get the strategy right, to become a more strategic thinker. Having conversations, Zach, if you don't get the strategy aligned, then it won't matter what tool you use. You might apply a great framework, but it's not moving in the direction that you want to go. And if the needle isn't moving in the right way, if the strategy is wrong, then the tactics and tools don't matter. Get the strategy right before you apply the tactics, tools, and frameworks. I thought, yes, that's really, really smart. But I know now that there's something that comes before strategy. The thing that comes before strategy is your energy. You see, if you don't have your energy right, if you don't have the energy of the team right, then it won't matter what your strategy is, because you will not consistently take action aligned with that strategy. Or even worse, if there is no energy, if you're burned out, if your team is burned out and there's no energy in the tank, then it doesn't matter what strategy you have, you're not going to make forward progress. So getting the energy right is something that precedes your strategy, which precedes your tactics and tools. So, in episode 23, one of my favorite authors, Anise Kavanaugh, shares the importance of what she calls IEP, intentional energetic presence. We go through all of the reasons why energy comes before strategy, specific examples and powerful tools that you can then apply once you get that piece correct. So as you leave this amazing buffet line of delicious career tips, I can't think of a better place to end this conversation than you getting your energy right. So let's do this.
If you are making people feel bad being around you, or you're so burnt out that you're not healthy and you're feeling resentful and your health is falling apart and your relationships are falling apart, I don't care how good your skills are. It doesn't matter, because now you're having a negative impact on other human beings and you're not feeling great yourself. So I think that's really important. And then from a company standpoint, I think one of the biggest things of feedback we get from companies is after we do the IEP work, they'll say they wish they would have had it sooner, because they've just spent millions of dollars on other training initiatives, D&I, leadership training, conflict management, like all this stuff. But those people are doing the skills, but they're not actually embodying the intentionality behind it, and they're not actually present, and they're still burnt out.
I love this reality you just pointed out, that there is no skill developed to even you could perfectly memorize the script, the model, master the skill, whatever, that can overcome really bad intention, energy, and presence. It doesn't matter. And I mean, to maybe a blunt example, I had a client one time who truly expressed to me that they hated their boss and they wanted to see their boss fail because of how they'd been treated by that person. And then there was a one-on-one conversation coming up, and had to very bluntly tell my client, listen, if you enter that room with an intention and energy of I hate you and I want to see you fail, it will not matter what you say. There is no coaching I can give you on what to say in that situation that will make it work in your benefit. And so just to put a really bold, extreme example out there of what this means.
For sure.
You mentioned, go ahead.
The other piece of that is, so for your client, I love it that you gave them that coaching. Your client then has to be able to find an authentic way to shift his or her state, because pretending doesn't work either. Pretending might be better than the original, but there is a way to shift that. And the way to shift that, the quick cheat sheet for shifting that and to really shift your state, And I do talk about this more in the books, but the quick cheat sheet is if you can shift from, I want this person to fail, I hate them, to curiosity. I wonder what's happening here. I wonder why we keep having this conversation. I wonder what's going on for them. I wonder why we have this dynamic. Here's the one that always sobers me up when I am so sure that I am just so right. And when I'm feeling really self-righteous, this is the one I really need to pull in. I go, I wonder what my boss's experience of me is right now.
Woo.
I wonder how he or
Oh.
she is experiencing me. This person I am so sure is such a jerk and that I am so determined to like butt heads with. How are they experiencing me? That one is sobering. And then the other thing to look at is, can you access gratitude or any kind of appreciation for them authentically? So the gratitude might be, you and I, Zach, are in a major resistance and we've got major conflict. Going into that conversation, if I come in with all that energy of like, ugh, with you, we're going, you're going to actually go, oh, I got the too. And then we're going to be, it's all contagious, right? Of course. So you're going to catch my vibe. You're going to then turn around, give it back to me. I'm going to be like, see, he's a jerk. And then we've got this huge collusion going on. So instead, if before I go into that conversation, I can take a deep breath and go, what can I be grateful about, Zach? And maybe I'm like, nothing, but I can go, well, you know what? I'm grateful that he's willing to have the conversation.
Yeah.
If I can shift the tiniest thing, I'm grateful that this conversation, I'm going to learn something in it. It's going to make me be a better leader because I'm going to have to learn how to do this dynamic differently. If I can authentically find gratitude, curiosity, the state of contribution, like how can I be helpful here?
Yeah.
If I can simply decide, you know what, I know that Zach and I are really having a hard time right now, but I really want to have a good relationship with him. Just the energy of deciding that that's what I want changes my state. And when you like have that conversation, it's going to be easier authentically. So.
I don't want to call it a hack, but this quick shift to say, you don't have to go from hating them to loving them.
Yeah.
If you can simply go from that really intense negative emotion to something that is curious, a neutral curiosity, a genuine curiosity, that is by itself a significant step forward to having a fruitful conversation. All right. Happy Engineer. I hope you really enjoyed all 10 of those powerful clips, the top 10 moments from 99 episodes of the Happy Engineer podcast. And I'll be honest, there are easily dozens, if not 100 other clips that could have been great candidates for this top 10 episode. Maybe one of your favorite moments didn't make the cut. I'd love to hear about which one you love that didn't make it. Send me an email, zach@oasisofcourage.com. I'd love to hear that. But here's what I really want you to know. You and I would not be here at all today if it weren't for my coach. Yes, coaches have coaches. And I remember vividly sitting down with my coach before this podcast existed. And I was talking about what we needed to do as an organization to spread our message, the message of building your career, balancing your life, and being happy as an engineering leader to more people, to get the word out and really make the impact that I felt called to make. We had a bigger vision than we were living into at that time. And my coach challenged me right then and there and said, Zach, what are you waiting for? Why have you not started doing the work that you know you need to do? I had podcast on my to-do list for 6 months and hadn't even begun considering it because I didn't have time. I was too busy. I didn't know how. It was going to be too expensive. I had all these excuses. And my coach really called me out and said, Zach, if this is something that's aligned with your vision and you already know it's what you need to do and what you want to do, what is holding you back? And the truth was only myself. And my coach helped me to make a commitment that day that I would launch the podcast immediately and that I would commit to 100 episodes. 100 episodes or bust. That was the commitment. And I put skin in the game, a financial commitment to my peers in my mastermind that if I didn't make it to episode 100 and I quit, that I would owe them a significant sum of money for not following through on that commitment. I was all in. And I want to say thank you to my coach. And I also want to say to you that none of these tips, none of these episodes of the Happy Engineer podcast matter at all if you don't take action. And the truth is, you can know what to do for a long time and not do it. Coaching is so powerful. It's what makes the difference in my life. It has ever since I went through my divorce and depression and rock bottom moment in my own career as an engineering leader. And I want to help you to experience the breakthrough and the growth that I see in my clients every single week, every single day, transforming their careers, but also designing the lifestyle that they love, experiencing deep fulfillment and happiness right here, right now, even in the midst of difficult times in the world and everything going on and every excuse we can come up with. They're creating clarity in their career blueprint, what they want, how to get there. They've got the courage and confidence to take action with coaching and accountability to follow through. And that's what I want for you too. Don't just listen to this podcast. Take action, and I want to help you get there. So I'm encouraging you right now, if you're still here, if you're still listening, something about this episode resonates for you, then let's take action together to get you to the career and life of your dreams. Pick up your phone, text the word lifestyle to 55444. One word, lifestyle, to 55444. You're going to get a reply. We'll send you a link right there to grab time with my team. We'll get some simple details from you on where you're at and where you want to get to. And then they'll help you get on my calendar. And we're going to do coaching together. And we're going to help you accelerate getting exactly what you want and getting there faster than you ever thought possible. I love sharing these messages with you on the Happy Engineer podcast. And believe me, we're going to keep giving you all the best actionable nuggets that we know, bringing in the best guests, bringing in bigger names, and continuing to push this forward. And I'm committed to taking this to episode 200. But I'm also committed to you. And my commitment to you is this. If you'll reach out to us and if you're ready to take action, you will get results beyond what you can imagine. Let's do that together. It takes courage to face fear in our lives, and fear holds us back from everything that we dream about. So, if you're inspired to go build your career, balance your life, and be happy, then text lifestyle to 55444 right now. Let's get time. Or if you're outside the U.S., just click that link in the show notes. We serve clients all around the world. I'd love to help you too. Let's do this.